Wednesday, January 29th. We're here for the regular scheduled commissioner meeting. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everybody to please rise and join in the pledge.
Where did this come from? That was just now signed this morning. He just now signed it.
Okay, so first item on the agenda is to adoption of the current agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of the agenda with two exceptions. Would like to pull item number 10 from the consent agenda and move item number 6 from consent agenda to regular business. So item number 6 in the consent agenda would be item number 4 in the regular business.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to remove item number 10 from the consent agenda and move number 6 to discussion as item 4. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We got the approval of the minutes from January 22nd. Is there any additions, revisions, or corrections?
No.
No change.
Okay. Moves down to approval of warrants and registers.
So we have two fund expenditures this morning. The first one, move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $958,587.33 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the Auditor's Office and the County Administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Fund expenditures. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $14,921.53 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the Auditor's Office and the County Administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 That is all.
All right, moves us down to the approval of the consent agenda. We have,
Public comment.
excuse me?
Public comment.
Oh, I skipped over public comment. Is there anybody in the room for public comment? Anybody on the phone? Nobody in the room? All right, we'll move down to the approval of the consent agenda items 1 through 5, 7, 8, and 9.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of the consent agenda items 1 through 5 and 7 through 9 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda items 1 through 5, 7, 8, and 9. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to regular business. Request for consensus, cultural practice easement. Mr. Briggs.
Good morning, board. My apologies, my computer's down, so I'm just going to wing it. I'm going to wing it here. So we have a request. Tridec has been working on this shoreline reconveyance, and so that's where the cultural practices easement comes back into play. There's a lot of shoreline in Benton and Franklin counties that's currently managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and so there's been a movement to reconvey that property to the local jurisdictions, so all the cities as well as the counties. Commissioner Baumann has been heavily involved in that process. He's gone to a lot of meetings, and I've been sort of involved in that, just assisting him in that. But to sort of cut to the chase here, what we're looking for is a consensus. Tridec wants some legal analysis, someone to come in and do a thorough review of this cultural practices easement that's sort of in a draft form. It's unlike any easement I've ever seen, and what it's related to is if the shorelines were to be reconveyed from the federal government back to the local governments, they want to ensure it looks like from that document that the local tribes are able to exercise their historic cultural practices. And that those would be exercised sort of in a way that is in harmony with other uses of the shoreline, so economic, environmental, sort of together in harmony. So that's sort of the gist of it. But because it's such a complex document that's not like a normal easement you would see on like a plat or something, I think it would benefit. And because we're talking about, the intersection of federal and local and state law, I think it would be a good benefit to all the local governments, including Franklin County, to have someone take a thorough look at this. So I believe, and I don't have the email in front of me, but I believe the amount is it 2,700?
2,700.
2,700 per jurisdiction. All the other jurisdictions have already agreed to pay this amount. So what we're looking for is a consensus from the board to pony up its 2,700 so that this legal review can commence. And I believe TRIDEC would be coordinating. They must already have an attorney that's the amount of the retainer for this review. So,
Questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair. As the jurisdictions have met on this, and all of our individual legal counsels have wrestled with it a little bit, we had a consensus among the shoreline reconveyance group that it would be wise to find an attorney that was an expertise had expertise in this area, and with Mr. Briggs in conversation, from our point of view, believe that it would be in our best interest to do this in consensus with everybody else and have one voice.
So we're just waiting on our $2,700, and we're just going to take that out of the general fund?
well, no, we're asking the board sort of for a consensus. I believe the action that I'd be requesting is a motion approving, because there's no document in front of us in terms of approving an agreement with an attorney. I believe what we're approving would be a motion to allocate $2,700 to be essentially earmarked and paid to TRIDEC, and then they're going to contract with that attorney directly.
So you're just looking for a consensus today to
Right.
do this?
A motion to approve the expenditure for this money to flow to TRIDEC for that attorney.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve funds up to and not to exceed $3,000 for a proportionate share for Franklin County to join TRIDEC in hiring legal counsel to review the cultural practices easement.
Second?
Been a motion, a second. Discussion. Mr. Johnson, have you had a chance to review this? Everything look?
Yeah. It's worthy investment. It'll get you the information to make further decisions. I think
Okay.
that's really what you're after at this point.
All righty. Been a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to Resolution 2025-054, establishing compensation package for Franklin County Administrator. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. So we are in the midst of initiating the final stages of putting the position for a county administrator out, and a number of you have been meeting with our recruiter, with GMP, and we are at the point of needing to finalize the salary range for the announcement. And so we've had a couple of discussions during our past several meetings in regards to what that range should be. Your most recent county administrator was compensated at approximately $152,000, $152,500, I believe it was, with some potential of having some additional funds available. So as we've done analysis of those comparables, in counties of like size that have county administrators or county managers that have similar responsibilities, because not all counties that have a county administrator may not have oversight over the department heads in a collective way. They may just like oversee administrative services or something, or be the budget manager, but not oversee the departments. And so looking at some comparable salary ranges from some more recent counties of Lewis County, which is 177,000, a smaller county than yours. These are primarily West Side counties. Benton County really is one of our few comparables, which we don't consider to be a comparable, that has a county administrator. On the east side, Benton County has that. Spokane County, again, counties that we would not consider to be comparables. So that's why I've tried to range population in particular in those that have similar. Clallam County up in the, again, a county that's smaller, around 80,000 people. Up in the peninsula is 195,000. And then you look at Island County, again smaller, 155,000. One of the most recent ones coming out of Grays Harbor County was 179, again a smaller rural county as well. So that's kind of the range that you're starting to see. So we have had discussions of kind of remaining at a low end of 145,000 at a low end, and there was a recommendation last week to go up to 200,000. Which would be kind of above the 195, the highest that we have seen. So just wanting to, we put in the resolution 145 and plus 200,000, recognizing we also are going to have compensation that's going to include our benefits, accruals of leave, paying any association dues, et cetera, training, and then other items that could be negotiated in the individual contract negotiation period as well. But the salary range for recruitment would be 145,000 to 200,000, which is what the resolution has. And so it's up before the board for a discussion. That's really what you all need to point at, at least in terms of recruiting. Mm-hmm. So I know that there's other recruitments in this community that have just finished and that are just going to initiate with similar type positions that will certainly be beyond probably $200,000. So it is a resolution that's available for you, 2025054. Certainly the discussion though for that base range salary is for your discussion. And I would just remind folks that we did not utilize the Benton County Administrator just right across the river. We did not use those as comparables.
Just for knowledge, what is the Benton County Administrator receiving? Do you know?
They are well over this $200,000 amount.
Okay, that's good enough.
As is the deputy administrator also makes more, plus some additional stipend for being county engineer as well.
Okay, commissioners, discussion, thoughts?
I think we're within the range, so.
Just as a point of reference, a couple of points of reference, I believe the outgoing city manager's salary was in the 220, just over 220,000 for the city of Pasco, and that individual just took the job as the port director, and that will be between 220 and 230,000. And so I think that this is in line with what this role, the cost of this role and the compensation package necessary. So.
All right. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of Resolution 2025-054 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2025-054. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Takes us down to Resolution 2025-055, Commissioners Department Budget Transfer. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. We are seeking a transfer of $45,000 to the commissioner's budget. There are three primary reasons for that transfer. The severance payment for the former county administrator, the current administrators, interim administrators' salary components that were not considered to be part of the budget initially, and some professional services that have also been accrued from that budget. So we are recommending that $45,000 to come from non-departmental reserve to the Commissioner's Office's professional services. So that is our recommendation. Available for any questions.
Questions, Commissioners?
No questions here.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval of Resolution 2025-055 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Takes us down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson.
I think we had another item for business. I
Oh,
think
number
we're going-
4. Yeah, that's
Yes.
right.
Item 6 from consent.
Yes.
Homeland Security Grant Fund Transfer.
Yes.
Resolution 2025037. Or, is it 037? Yeah, 037. Homeland Security Grant Transfer Fund.
So, Mr. Chairman, the reason that I believe that we needed to pull this item from consent is I believe there was some concern about this.
Right, we may want to go into executive session actually to discuss the issues. This,
Okay, and how long would we want to go into executive session for?
say 15 minutes. We'd want a representative from the sheriff's office there, as well as the board, myself, and Ms. Lloyd.
Would you call out the RCW on that, please?
Sorry, BRCW, was it 4230, 110, 1I, potential litigation?
Okay, so at this time, we'll recess into executive session for 15 minutes, you said?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Be enough? Okay. Okay,
the
we're
end
back
of
to
the
regular
day-
section, and we will extend the executive session for 10 more minutes, so we will recess into executive session. Thank you. We've come out of executive session. We're back to regular session. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion for Resolution 2025-037 Homeland Security Grant Fund Transfer.
I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 2025-037, Homeland Security Grant Transfer.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Takes us down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Let me give you a couple of differing updates on several issues. We are we talked about the recruitment for the county administrator, so that is well underway. I think you have individually, have had an opportunity to discuss, or you will this week, with the recruitment firm. So hopefully, if you've not got that scheduled, I think Teresa has scheduled those. So I think maybe, is that today, Teresa? I can't remember. So you've got time today with each of them. So that's great. We do have and I'll send an email to each of you that describes a little bit more. We have made a offer to someone for administrative assistant position within the board, so really excited about the good recruitment that we had and good candidates, and we have made that offer. Teresa and I have did those interviews, and background checks are, all those things are underway and completed. Let's see. Workshops, we got the salary matrix discussion here today. Also working on, with Mike McCall, setting up the HAPO 2024 year-end report, kind of a first quarter report for you all as well. I think we're moving that. So remind me of Mike and I were talking on the night of the 12th, I think is the
Night meeting.
and that's
Yes.
going to be the presentation on
The 19th is a presentation on the COVID shot.
that's on the 19th
That's
during
on the
day.
19th, and that, we had to schedule that during the day.
Okay.
because we already have all the doctors lined up.
Okay, so Mike, the 12th then. Okay, we were bantering yesterday about what they would be. So that'd be the 12th for the HAPO presentation. Working, and thanks to Jennifer, some of the application materials for the Department of Commerce and that $3 million grant for the HAPO HVAC system, and still working with Commissioner Bauman a bit on the design build, design bid build, design build, and some of the options that are available to that, the uniqueness of the RCW. We had a staff meeting. We've been going through that also with Mr. Briggs. So working through some final items on that before we can get you all to make a final decision on the pathway forward. We had an advisory committee meeting last week, and so I think all of you were able to attend that. Looking at some potential alternatives besides just having our staff do parking lot resurfacing, potential piggybacking on another county's oil and gravel, because we might be able to secure a warranty on work, which might be another alternative for us as well to be thinking about in addition to that. Met with Commander Harmon yesterday as we start to, if I fulfill my commitment to you to look at the jail medical. And so we're really looking at, why are we seeing amounts greater than what we have budgeted and or greater than what were in the contract. So working through really identifying what the original contract was. We've done a couple of contract amendments. One amendment, actually, the contract didn't get amended in terms of a $250,000 increase that was authorized in the budgetary process. And so really starting to look at, okay, but yet what are the services being done, including the medical assisted treatment for behavioral health, chemical dependency, et cetera. That is a variable amount depending on how much money comes from the healthcare authority, but yet we only have a finite amount in there. So really starting to look at getting to you what the contract has provided for, what services beyond the contract might be being delivered, and then how do we put that all in front of you in one location. So working through that, auditor's office, Commander Harmon, just trying to gather all that information. So we'll have that back in front of you here in the next couple of weeks just for you to take a look at. I've been working and going through kind of the surplus property ordinance that Mr. Briggs has prepared. So I think we'll probably do a workshop on that here in the next couple of weeks for you to kind of see that before we bring it back for full adoption. He has an ordinance, kind of in an ordinance framework. I think we both, you know, we're going to have to take a look at whether we beef up a lease section or not, or just leave it as void or not. So we'll be taking a look a little more at that. I think those are the big pieces for me right now.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Commissioner Bauman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This last week was invited to present on county government to this year's class of Leadership Tri-Cities. So thankful for the invitation there, and enjoyed visiting with a lot of people that are working diligently to better our community. Multiple meetings with HAPO, had a large event there this weekend with a sportsman show, and enjoyed watching that show take place and get to use the facility, and it's, as we've been upgrading it, and that was very well received. As Eric mentioned, meeting with our contractor that has provided HVAC services at the HAPO Center in the past, and wrestling through the process of preparing to put heating and air conditioning in the arena side of the facility. HAPO Advisory Board meeting and the master plan rollout, and just really enjoyed seeing that, and I think that the excitement is being felt. The community is starting to see that the county and the city coming together to try to make that a real jewel in our community. So excited to be a part of that. Benton County Emergency Services Executive Board meeting, a BIPEN board meeting, and met with the contractor GMP that is looking for a county administrator for us, and so had a good discussion with her yesterday, and then also did an interview with a potential planning director. Also did that yesterday, and enjoyed that conversation, and look forward to the next step in that process. And Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Commissioner Mullen?
So yes, last week had the HAPO Advisory Board meeting with the master plan rollout. It's exciting to see that with cooperation from the city of Pasco that we could actually build this into quite the destination property. Just a lot of excitement there. Pasco Chamber meeting went over the Ag Hall of Fame, which was a sold-out event with over 360 participants. Great event. Just cleanup at the HAPO Center is really looking good, so good job out there. It's exciting to see the improvements, and that is my report.
Thank you. My last week was Columbia River Policy Advisory Committee, and they're asking for a lot of input from the counties and citizens, so if you have any input, it'd be good to get in touch. HAPO Advisory, all three commissioners were there. It was a pretty full room for that meeting. That shows a lot of excitement from the community, and people are starting to step up and notice what's going on out there, and it's pretty amazing. Ben Franklin Workforce Development, and then I had some calls from constituents on approaches, wondering why are we, if you do anything $25,000 or greater, you got to put a paved approach off of the roadway, and some of these roadways aren't all-weather roadways, so when they become an all-weather roadway, they'll be disturbed in order to make an all-weather roadway. I think we really need to look at this. I've got more and more people coming up to me because it's quite an expense for anybody out there wanting to do a $25,000 improvement on their property, and they got to put a paved approach in, which is another 10. People, you know, I mean, they want to do some improvements, I don't think we should be punishing them. If they don't live on an all-weather roadway, they shouldn't have to put that paved approach in. And then I don't know if you guys received the letter from Bob Ferguson.
Yes.
I, for one, I'm not willing to sign that letter. I don't know if you read through it, but I think we just ignore it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's about the executive order that Trump signed on illegals in the country.
Okay, I'll have to look.
I think you need to read it, and I'm not in favor of signing that. I'm going to say that right now. That's the end of my report. So with that, we'll move down to public comment. Anybody for public comment?
Good morning, Michelle Andrews, Franklin County. I also attended the HAPO meetings and started to see that they're adding a new sheet of ice. Our son is almost 40 years old, and he had to go all the way to Walla Walla to do hockey in the mornings and get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So that's been needed for a long time, and it's good to see that. It's good to see that they're looking at the whole community, and I think that was a very good meeting, very, very supportive. I also support not signing any letter from Governor Ferguson, and as far as being unable, our legislators and our representatives unable to make amendments or even debate is an unconstitutional act, and you should look under apportionment for that and maybe make your own letter back to them. That is illegal. I also attended Michael Baumgartner's meeting over in Walla Walla, and he is very supportive of the dams. He's all energy approach. He's working in education, and he wants to assure us that he believes that the sports issue for men and women are going to stay that for men and women. And because of AI, they're going to need every bit of energy they need. And you probably know that, but just so the public knows, AI is taking a lot of power and energy. And so everything is on the table. And even though we've had some discussion, the gas turbines have been removed, the infrastructure is there, and each of those gas turbines produces 300 megawatts of power. And it's available right now, so I would urge you to go to the PUD and City of Pasco, open up more business. I'm still hearing that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is going to hold those little mini nuclear things up for up to 10 years. So we need a stopgap where we're still growing and building business and making Franklin County and Pasco a good place to live. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Nobody's on the phone? Okay. Seeing nobody else coming to the mic, we'll see, is there any other business for the good of the county? No executive session needed?
No.
Closed session?
Weren't we going to do one?
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yes, we do need one, RCW 4230-110, 1I potential litigation. Just myself, the board, the clerk of the board, and Ms. Lloyd can be present for that one. We'll need approximately 10 minutes.
Okay. So at this time, we'll recess into executive session for 10 minutes, starting at 9:57. Thank you.
Light's still on, so I'm still
Yeah,
recording.
might want to wait until Teresa gets back here. Are the mics?
Let me check.
Okay, we are back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned, and we will take a 5-minute recess before we go into our workshop. after this, Eric?
Careful what you say there, Jeff.
Okay, we are back from our break, and we will call to order our workshop and ask for approval of the workshop agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the workshop agenda with one item of a discussion of the decision matrix, or I'm sorry, of a matrix discussion.
Yep,
Second?
been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll open up public comment to the matrix discussion only. Is there anybody in the room for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move down to the matrix discussion. And I believe we're, I'll go.
Oh, okay.
Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I do have a presentation. So basically, I'm going to just be discussing the matrix for the non-bargaining employees. As we all know, the bargaining units have their own matrices. Most of them are in line with what's on the non-bargaining matrix, but this is specifically non-bargaining. There is 7.5 hour and an 8 hour matrix. I'm going to be focusing on the 8 hour when it comes down to showing you some different options. Just to make it easier, the hourly rate is the same on both. The annual salary and the biweekly salary changes just because it's different hours working. So some of the topics that we're going to cover are additional steps. That's where we're going to be focusing on just the 8 hour matrix. Issue with minimum wage, salary grades, salary threshold for exempt employees, and then of course the exempt positions. So adding steps to the matrix, here's just a little bit of history. I don't know when it started, but the matrices were 14 steps with a 2.5% increase between each step. In 2008, Franklin County went to a 7-step matrix following the Hayes study, which condensed the steps, making the increases to 5% in between each step from the 2.5%, so shrinking it from 14 steps to 7 steps. Condensing that matrix did allow employees to receive higher increases for each step, but it also means an employee will reach the end of their grade at a quicker rate. This would be more specifically for your bargaining units, especially those who have a 6-month increase at a successful promotion, then another increase at a year, so within 1 year you're on to step 3. Additional factors, hiring managers must gain approval of the board to hire an employee above step 1. That's in our personnel policy. If an employee starts at a higher step, they would have even less time before reaching the end or stepping out. Requests are starting to be made to add one additional step to the matrix. And though we are focusing on non-bargaining matrices, it is good to remember that the different bargaining groups have different probationary periods. So I referenced the 6 months and then to a year. Sheriff's office or civil service positions in particular are just a 1-year probation, so they vary. And then that allows to play a factor in the movement and the steps for those probationary periods. So options, we suggest to add not just 1 step to the matrix, but to add 7 more steps to the matrix. However, the increase between each steps is where you could make those adjustments. So what does that look like? You'll see a few options, but we'll focus on one matrix specifically, and that's going to be the 8 hour matrix. All options are reflecting the changes between 8 and 14 only. You'll see the 1 through 7, but they're going to remain status quo, and that is that 5% in between each step. The ones that I'm going to present you are a 5% between each step. Again, this is between 8 and 14. A 3% between each step, 2.5% between each step, and a decreasing percentage between each step, and I'll explain that when we get to that one. So moving on to, oops, if I can get my mouse to work, the Excel. Oh, how do we change this to view the other? I gotta shut down a slideshow. There we go. Yeah, there we go. So this one is the 5% between each. So this course goes from grade 11 up to grade 23. I'm gonna try to focus here just kind of in the middle, but I can scroll up and down. So the white is our standard matrix. These are actually the numbers for 2025. Again, this is the 8 hour employee matrix only for non-bargaining employees. So you can, these are 5%, so then this was what it would look like from steps 8 to 14 with an additional 5 steps in between each, or 5% in between each steps. So you can see where some of these, like, I've kind of focused on annual salaries. You can also do this as an hourly salary. Here in the middle one, this is biweekly, this is an overtime. As to where you would end with some of these annual rates. Are there any questions on what that kind of looks like so far?
What is the purpose of adding the additional steps?
So we have been asked, and it's been by bargaining groups, to add 1 step. So I will get a little bit more information further on. There's some other factors that would help support the reasoning for adding extra steps. So if I can get through the rest of the presentation, I might be able to answer that question, or we'll come back around to it.
Well, it just seems like it would add a lot more paperwork, but maybe not.
I don't know, paperwork is our life, right? Job security? But I do understand that. Commissioner Baumann, did you have a question?
There's no way that I can make a informed or have an informed opinion looking at a sheet like that on a page. So I'm going to need this in printed form and to just be able to go through it and digest it and to be able to come up with any semblance of some good questions.
Okay. And I respect that, and I absolutely expect that. I just want to give you the information today, maybe answer some higher level questions if we could, and then just definitely come back to this. So at a 3%, again, 1 through 7 in the white is 5% in between, and these are some of the figures that would be a 3% in between each step for each one of the grades 8 through 14. And then you go to the 2.5. These are just really showing, if you focus again on annual salaries, kind of gives you the best idea of kind of where people would be standing or employees would be standing on each one of these grades. And then this downgradable one, basically what it does is 8 through 14 goes down by 0.5% each step to go from 4.5 down to 1.5. So that's just another option as well. But these are just some numbers and some figures to see. But yes, I agree that would be printed out. Any questions there?
Could you give us some background on why that we have 7.5-hour workdays and 8-hour workdays? What's the thought process and the reasoning behind having that?
Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you because I know 7.5 has been around for quite some time. I don't really know why they're 7.5 versus 8 hours. If employees were at 8 hours, and I will tell you, I've heard some feedback that there are definitely employees who do not want to go to an 8-hour work week. You know, that's kind of a natural increase or raise, if you will. It's just you are working an extra 2.5 hours a week. I don't know the whole history as to why there's 7.5 and why there's 8. So, unfortunately, I don't have that full answer for you.
Do you have any idea how long it has been, those 7.5 to 8? And was there a point in time, like during the recession, they didn't give any salary increases, so they cut certain sub positions to 7.5 hours and held and froze salaries, or?
I only know that Mike Hillian at one point in a meeting referenced that when he started, there were 7.5-hour employees. So since he's the longest running elected official in the county at this point, so it's been around for a while. I do know back in, what was it, 2008, 2009, something like that, with that major recession, they did stop raises. They ended up doing furloughs. You know, of course, around roughly that time, I think I said 2008 is when they shrunk it, so people automatically ended up stepping out. But I was fortunate to have a few years more of steps, but then, yeah, you're kind of frozen unless there's any sort of COLA. But there were furloughs and stuff during that recession in 2008, 2009.
I'm just not aware of anywhere in private industry that there is a 7.5-hour workday, and just wondered if there was some background on what the purpose was behind it, because our society has been built around that 8-hour workday, and this seems to be an odd, and just wondered if there was reasoning or background behind it. Thanks.
Okay, so let me go back to my presentation. What did you hit down here? Yeah. Sorry, let me jump forward to where we were. So I would say this would be my recommendation, my not recommendation, for what it's worth. Even though I'm the one that put all of these together, I felt like the 2.5% kind of made the most sense out of all of those. So,
Would that be between all 14 steps?
no.
Okay.
The reason I would not encourage to go to 2.5 between steps 1 and 7 is I would not recommend taking what we currently all have and then taking 14 years to get to something. And then even if you extend that out, you would be adding 8 to 14, but you would be taking 1 to 7 out to 14.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even as employee reaction would not be pleasant.
Okay.
Then it would not be my recommendation at all. Okay, so questions, minimum wage, so that's our next topic.
So
So-
before you want to take questions on the matrix
Yeah,
stuff first?
sorry, did we?
So
have
I
more
don't know if
questions?
you ever got to answer Commissioner Mullen's question, which is why? Why would we add any additional steps? And
Right.
besides someone they might be asking for, I get that, but what's the business purpose for us doing that from going to 7 to 8 or 8 to 14? And, what's the, set the stage for the policy perspective for why the board would want to do that?
So some of it was gonna be further in here,
Okay.
counting for the salary thresholds, minimum wage, things like that. Outside of that too, that is one thing that I hear quite a bit, well, we're stepped out. The only thing we can have is a COLA, if we had more steps. Bargaining units are starting to ask for one more additional step. When I've asked, it's like, well, because we're stepped out. And personally, I'm thinking, well, what about next year? I mean, you're always gonna eventually get to where you're stepped out. But then I think too that employees get to that end of their steps, their end of their grade, and that's where more reclassifications start to happen. So, and it's maybe, I don't want to speak for anybody and what their justification is. There's a lot of those reclassifications that happened before I stepped into HR. But I've heard that as one of a big reason is, well, we're stepped out, so the only way we can get something is to reclassify a position. So it potentially gets rid of some of that if it's not necessarily a position that needs to be reclassified for a major reason of job changes and things like that. Of course, if the salary is not right, then that's a different factor in which to look at. So, does that help answer your question a little bit right now?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Okay.
Have we done the analysis to show how many of our employees are actually at the top of their grid? Do you have that?
That number I do not have. I got a few other factors, but I did not get that one. So I could get that information. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. So on to minimum wage, which is another factor. And I really do feel all of these topics kind of roll in together. It was hard to find out what's the order of the most important. I do feel that they're all a factor in themselves. So just a little history for minimum wage. In 1998, Initiative 688 was passed, requiring LNI to make COLA adjustments to the minimum wage between 2001 and 2016 based on the CPIW, which is the urban wage earners and clerical workers. In 2016, Initiative 1433 was passed, giving different requirements for minimum wage from 2017 to 2020. And then starting again in 2021, adjustments to the minimum wage returned to being based on the CPIW. All that information was obtained from the LNI website. Some additional history in 2022, just for our county, positions were reclassified from grade 9 to grade 10 and the removal of steps, due to the removal of steps in the minimum wage. 2023, that grade 9 was removed from the salary matrix, as no positions were classified in grade 9 any longer. I believe we were up to the first 3 steps being gone in that grade. In 24, positions were reclassified from grade 10 to 11 due to the removal of steps of minimum wage, and grade 10 was also removed with our budget process last year. Again, at the time, step 1 would have been removed from grade 10, so we were starting to fall below minimum wage. Some things to consider, I find that interesting. Our starting grade, which is grade 11, is only $2.10 above minimum wage for 2025. As a county, historically, our starting pay has been more than $5 above minimum wage. So here's just, and this is for grade 12, as noted below, the minimum wage the year starting in 2017 versus our starting wage. So 2017, it was $11, ours was $16.55, so on and so forth down. Here's from 20 to 22. And now, our minimum wage, we are in the $3 range for our full-time benefited employees. So these are only referencing our full-time benefited employees. For 24 to 25, the county, again, this is non-bargaining groups, or non-bargaining employees, sorry. It was a 3% COLA. Minimum wage went up by 2.35 is what minimum wage was. So we're just under $4, but we're under $4, so we're still in that $3 range. So just kind of some interesting history and where it started to really start dropping down for where our starting wages, and that would be due to, whatever COLAs were approved for the county. At the time in CPI, I remember years it was 1.5% for the COLAs. So just some interesting information there.
Did you do any analysis through that during the time that the starting pay has declined in that minimum wage to starting wage? Did you do any analysis to see how much the benefits package increased during that same amount of time?
Not when I threw this together over the weekend. I do have some of that from a benefits discussion I had, I think, last year, so I could kind of present that information. I do know they went up. There was a 7-year gap, I think it was, 6-7 years that the contribution changes didn't go up. In 2022, it went up by $300 and some. 2023, it went up back up by another $300 and some. But for about 7 years before that, it was stagnant, if you will.
So that would provide a more complete picture, is while that spread has lessened, the benefits package has increased, so it'd be interesting to know the difference there.
Yep, and I can add that in.
Yeah, it would be, interesting to be able to put what I'll call total compensation. And clearly, employees, that salary is really what they focus in on, but really looking at the total compensation of both benefits, retirement, the things that we make contributions to, so they could see a total compensation.
The expense to the county
Yeah.
paid out.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
Okay, so what does this look like for us? Just brings us to the next topic, salary grades. And then are we paying what we should be paying? Are our positions accurately compensated? Do we need to have a look at specifically those positions that are classified in grades 12 through 15, 12 through 16, or even up to 12 to 17? Should some positions be reclassified and moved up a grade? This ties to the minimum wage concern and maintaining our compensation distance as a county government employer. Since you brought up total compensation and benefits, I was only focused on wages, I will be honest in this. So that brings us to kind of salary thresholds. Salary thresholds are tied to exempt status. So exempt status, and this one only shows through 26, but it's a WAC or RCW that actually gives us to 2028, I believe, into what the requirement is. Does it go up beyond 2.25? Do you remember? 2.5. Oh, you know what? I think there was the rest of this page, and I forgot to add it. It's right. 27 and 28 go up to 2.5. So our exempt classifications start at grade 16. We have assistant directors and basically assistant managers on grade 16. With the current requirements, if we had to hire a new hire filling an exempt position, we would need to fill at a grade 16 step 6, or step 6 if it was a grade 16. Step 4 if it's a grade 17, step 2 if it's a grade 18. So just some information on our exempt employees that fall within that. You know, this is where we would kind of be required by this salary threshold requirement to backfill a new hire position. This again ties in with the minimum wage, salary grades, and salary thresholds. And then, like I said, I missed it, but 27 and 28 go up to 2.5 times minimum wage. And last week, you approved a resolution for this very issue, for 2 employees who are exempt and fell below the, that. So any questions on that so far?
Explain the 2.25, 2.5, explain what that means.
Means that the minimum hourly rate has to be 2.25 times the amount of minimum wage. So minimum wage is $16.66. So you take $16.66 by 2.25. I think it's $37.49 an hour.
So you have to hire somebody, and that's the minimum that you have to hire them at.
If they are hiring for an exempt position.
In
And just-
exempt status.
Yes.
And describe an exempt status position.
Generally, it's salary, but we're all kind of semi-salary, and these positions do not receive any sort of overtime or comp time.
So do we have any of those salary positions that are at 7.5 hours per day positions, or are they all 8?
I believe they're all 8.
Okay.
That I did look, there are 51 exempt employees for non-bargaining. I didn't look at 18 necessarily, but for grade 16, there's 5 employees. In grade 17, there's 2 employees.
So an exempt status, just to clarify a little bit more, it means they are exempt from overtime pay under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So they take their position, and if they are required to work 50 hours a week, they are exempt from that overtime status.
And so that-
And to meet that status, then there are also some criteria around the role that they play then as well within the organization, and which is also defined. So
Yeah.
I don't have all of those up in front of me, but they,
And so that only qualifies between 40 and 50 hours, and when they go past 50 hours, then they are back into
I just used 50
overtime.
as the example.
But I believe that's the case, right? So it's not infinitely exempt.
I haven't seen that, but
It reapplies, I believe, at 50 hours.
It's been a while since I've been into this area, and I know that some organizations have some flexibility that they may not even start counting overtime till 43 or 45, at which time you might get compensatory time might be taken instead of overtime pay. I think there's some flexibility within that. I'm not an expert on this, so I probably should stop right where I'm saying now, but
So the 2.25, does that, I'm assuming it's an RCW that controls that. Inside of that RCW, is there any consideration made for benefits package?
no, this is strictly salary.
So if you have a $1 an hour benefits package or a $30 an hour benefits package, you still have to pay the 2.25. That can't be considered in there.
No, it's strictly salary.
So is there a requirement for the benefits that a governmental organization is required to provide? Health, dental, vision, retirement, any of that stuff. Is any of that required by statute?
We are required by ACA to offer a benefits package that meets the minimum standard for ACA, the Affordable Care Act. And what else, because we're county? Yeah? Well, we have to offer a benefits package. We're required.
We're required under the ACA, the federal
So the-
statutes, basically.
and then
require us
being-
to do that.
And is that also over 51 employees, 51 plus employees for benefits
I believe
too?
that's correct.
Yeah.
As soon as you hit 51 employees for the entire county, there's certain requirements that we have to meet under the ACA.
Yeah.
How much they can spend out of pocket, how much we need to provide them, that is all federal ran though.
That'd be helpful to know what the required minimums are. You know, this 2.25 plus the benefits package, what the required minimums are. And I recognize we can go beyond that, but that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that's fair. Any other questions?
I have one, but I don't know if this pertains to this, but we're Washington State. Aren't we the highest per hour rate of the nation?
Well, I know, that I don't know. I know Seattle's hourly rate's higher than ours, their minimum wage.
Well, they're Washington State too, but I'm saying
Well, no, I know.
we're apples. We're talking about federal here, Affordable Care Act, all this going on federally, but Washington State, we're one of the highest paying minimum wages of the nation, and if we're comparing, all this to other counties, when we do the comparisons there, are we comparing the states about where we're at with? Because I know Oregon and Idaho, what's their minimum wage?
I didn't look into that. I know that we're drastically higher than the federal minimum wage, which I think is $7.25 an hour,
Exactly.
something like that. And I did run across it, and I just don't remember what it said, but there is something about our requirement. Like, we can, as a county government, we can set our minimum salary higher than minimum wage.
Right, but you
We
can't
can
be
do that,
below
but
it.
I did not compare Washington to any other state. I don't know what that comparison is.
And just, if I can interject, Commissioner.
Go ahead.
So it looks like the salary, and I'm just reading this off of MRC. It's been a while since I've looked at it too, and I don't do a lot in this area, but it does look like it's set in the Washington Administrative Code. This is per MRSC. So there's a couple of sections of the Washington Administrative Code that are sort of setting that wage salary, and that's based on the Consumer Price Index, I guess. But those are updated every year. So I can give you those whacks if you want them. And then, so it's not just the salary, it's the salary, and then as Eric described, whether they're doing executive, administrative, professional, or computer professional duties. So they need to sort of meet those two requirements, and then their job duties have to be in the appropriate.
For
Occupational.
exempt, to reach the exempt status. So
Right.
there's
Right.
a job duty set of classifications that
Right.
you give the test to, and if you've achieved that, then you be in exempt status.
Just making a point, basically.
So it appears that Washington State has the highest state minimum wage. The only place that's higher is Washington DC at $17.
I think Oregon was fifth. I didn't pull that up. Oregon was right behind.
California's also
Washington,
not too far
California, New
behind,
York,
yeah.
Connecticut.
I think there's also a difference of the cost of living within the area too, would be a factor in that. I know I went to visit my brother in Texas, and gas was phenomenal down there. I mean, $2 and something an hour. Good Lord, a gallon. Anyway, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, there is an aspect of looking at total compensation, but this conversation is strictly talking about what we need to do legally to make sure that we are meeting minimum wage requirements.
Right.
So this is what this is primarily focusing on. So yes, total compensation is a conversation to have, but regardless of what we're providing them in benefits, we are legally required to provide them these standards.
So
Yeah,
you-
for the exemption status.
So you probably need to begin to think about an exempt status grid, autonomous of an hourly employee grid, so that you can potentially keep them separated and in compliance with this.
It might be beneficial to have different matrices for exempt status versus hourly versus, 7.5 and 8 hour, kind of a conversation to have. And it would be nice to probably lay those all out so that we can look at longevity purposes and make sure that we're meeting these requirements in the long term instead of having this conversation every year.
I can appreciate that. I have a little concern, as Commissioner Mullen kind of pointed out a little bit. Why are we continuing to make things more complicated by adding additional steps? It seems like instead of making things somewhat simpler and easier to keep track of, we keep getting more and more complicated, i.e. 8 hour, 7.5 hour exempt, more steps and all that kind of stuff. So I can appreciate what you're saying, that this isn't necessarily about the total benefits package, but it sort of is, because that's a discussion that we need to have, and that's been an ongoing discussion we've been having for the last year of we're on a crossroads as a county with a structural deficit that we have to get our arms around and understand. And so, yeah, as we develop this idea and thought, I think that that's definitely a critical part of having this conversation.
And I'd have to agree, because we went from 14 steps to 7, and now we're going to go back to 14, and I'm just,
And it really wouldn't have to be 14. It's just, let's start with an idea.
Okay.
Let's kick something out there. I personally don't see a major benefit of adding an 8th step. I mean, like I said, you're going to be maxing out no matter, you're eventually going to get there if you stay around long enough. It's just, if you're going to add one, I mean, maybe it's 3. It's a good ask. I don't see the full benefit of just a one step.
and the only way that anybody could be compensated for more work that they've been able to do since they're seasoned is to reclassify the position. There's no other way that we could compensate without steps.
I don't know how else you would. We don't have any sort of other, there's not a longevity, what word am I trying to?
Yeah, I mean,
Incentive,
if
there's
you
not-
ended up somehow, either through negotiations and collective bargaining, or through your personnel policy manual to provide some longevity incentives, if that's the policy direction you want to go in, you would think about how do you want to provide for that? Do you want to do that in a salary, in a step? Do you want to do that on an annual basis compensation? You'd begin to think about, do you want to provide an incentive for longevity? I think you could start to look at, I think you have to look at this way. You only have, your pot of money for salaries is finite. And so what do you want to prioritize from expanding the grid? So, you will shrink probably the number of people that are taking advantage of that, because you don't have, this gets to where how many people are really at the top of the grid, or, how much would this cost you for people that are staying 15 years in the exact same position? I don't know if that may be worth doing, because that may be your least cost-effective thing, or take it on a case-by-case longevity position. Or, you do the salary survey to keep your grid competitive. So your grid is always competitive within your defined marketplace. And every couple of years, you are on a reoccurring schedule to update your grid. So your grid stays competitive in the marketplace as well. So it's just not going up by a cost of living adjustment. There are certain positions in particular, and we're seeing that in certain professions, as you can see. We're not competitive in the marketplace. So how do you adjust accordingly? Oh. And so if you have a finite set of money, I would think about it and you talked about the grid and the competitiveness of the grid a little bit, is what's your priority? Is it around longevity, or is it about the grid? Is it about being competitive in the workplace in positions where you're having turnover? So there's different ways to be thinking about it as well, because as you know, there's only a finite amount of money to put towards your greatest expense, which is personnel.
And I guess I just want to add, I mean, there's 2 separate conversations going here of whether or not we do want to extend out your steps and increase your steps. But then there's also this underlying conversation of looking at the salary matrix and the salary threshold overall. And that's probably where more of the legal analysis would be more into that overall salary compensation, salary thresholds, making sure that we are meeting minimum requirements for compensation. The steps, like Margot has suggested, other union groups have asked for. They've asked for at least 1 step extra at 5%. That is a conversation, and that's more of the business side, the policy side of things, of what do we want to give employees. Longevity-wise, do you have people who have been here for years that haven't had a step increase in years? That's a conversation to think on the business side of things.
And do you think we're really confident that we have all of the exempt versus non-exempt employees classified correct, or are there some non-exempt employees that should be exempt?
I think
well.
that's something that we need to look at as well, because there have been changes in job duties and changes in things that don't necessarily make their way to HR. So you have people who are getting additional job duties that would essentially push them into exempt status and put them at a higher salary threshold, that we just have not been brought forth, to the board and to HR, and bringing in that conversation to make sure that they're getting paid at the appropriate levels.
The last overall review of all the job descriptions and whatnot too was 2017, 2018, which got finalized for 2019. So it's been a minute too
Yeah.
for a full compensation study for all of the positions.
So you referenced this, looking forward 27, 28, 29. Is those numbers, the X factor, is that number already predetermined?
27 and 28, it's at 2.5.
Yeah.
So
And is that where it stops, or is it?
that's
just
where
going-
these all stop. I assume that the state legislature would probably come back and have this discussion again and rewrite the regulations so that these are all for the next 8 years.
Yeah, because those are pretty significant numbers. I mean, that's from 2.25 to 2.5. That's $4.16 an hour, and so that's a pretty significant jump.
Are you trying to go back to?
I want to look at the history. Sorry. I mean, we're looking here where this has just been an ongoing conversation at the state legislature level, so I'd assume that they would probably come back and do something similar. Realistically, I don't necessarily think it's going to be starting again, 2029 at 2.5, what minimum wage is at the time. I think they're going to have an overall comprehensive conversation and kind of drop that number back down to say, hey, you only need to be at 1.25 or 1 times or 1.5. I think that's probably most likely what the legislature is going to do. I can't say that it's guaranteed, but just given past practice, that's probably what's going to happen.
I probably should know this, but in 2021, did the RCW amend to put those numbers in, or did they delegate that responsibility to
That was-
LNI and rulemaking?
Yeah, so that was 2 LNI rulemaking. So that chart is from the regulation drafted by LNI. So
So, yeah, I mean, that's, maybe something for you to have a discussion with, at LSC.
Yeah.
With counties as a whole to say, boy, that's, we should drop that down.
So you referenced a wage study. Is there, I'm trying to think of how to ask this question. I'm not really even sure how to ask the question. Is there a way, or is there currently in place a set of parameters that if 2 different individuals or organizations did a wage study, that they would come up to the same result? If you did a wage study and she did a wage study, is the result going to be the same because you're working on the same criteria, or is there somewhat opinion-based?
Well, I'll give you my perspective. They can chime in. Is that here's the difficulty in a wage study, unless you get really into the weeds. Is I might look at a clerk one or a clerk 2 in one office, and our clerk 1 might be is doing a clerk 2 in another office, and so there is some
Ambiguity in that.
Yeah, there is some subjectivity in it. We could simply do one because the Association of Washington Cities and the counties have access to that, does an annual wage study, and so you can do it, or you pay a firm like Gallagher to come in and do a wage study, and they will do enough analysis of what you select as be your peers to hopefully even it out, because they're not going to go and read every position description in every county that they're doing that work for.
So I guess-
it'll get you close into the band, and so you pick your, who do we consider do we want to, be our peer counties, so to speak, or our peer municipalities, so to speak.
Is there a way to assemble the criteria and ask the individual departments to provide that on a annual or a biannual basis, so that we don't get 8 years behind, 7 years behind in having a good data for knowing this? Is there a way to is there currently in place, I can't do this, but is there criteria in place that, for instance, the sheriff's department could provide that a wage comparison study for the sheriff's department, and the IS department can do that, and the HR can do that, and the assessor?
The collective bargaining groups, I can guarantee you, do that.
They do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I also just want to say that if we are going to require departments to do that, we need to be very particular on the comparables that we pick, because
So
that could be
You answered
very-
my question.
Very
You
drastic.
answered my question.
Yeah.
Is there, because, when you go do a public works bid, for instance, there is very specific criteria. You will do this based on this, and this is, and then it's, when you open the package, that's what it is. And so that's, I just didn't know. I didn't know. So not really a way to do what I asked.
Not really, and they do pull different CPIs. There are definitely multiple CPIs throughout the state and throughout the country. And so it's going to be hard to, kind of pick a CPI that we all agree on, and what is the appropriate CPI. I mean, you could follow Washington State and use their CPIW and say, this is the CPI that we're following as a county. This is what we'll base our COLA on. This is what we're going to base everything else on. It's just kind of what the county wants to do and what you want to pick. But, in the terms of CBAs, it's kind of, we need to be particular in what we're asking our departments to do.
And there's different ways to be looking at it as well. If there are certain positions where we are not losing them to another workplace, another public sector workplace. The engineering field right now is, we generally are probably losing them to the private sector because the economy is driving that. So who would be our competitors? So do you start to try and understand where are we losing folks to, and we want to stay competitive in that marketplace. For a long time, public health nurses was a really competitive one because the nurse, if you could do really well in being a nurse. So do you set that up separately? So you might think about that, or do you just do nope? We're only looking at counties. The sheriffs. Where is the sheriff losing deputies to? Are they losing them to the municipalities? Okay, do we use municipalities now as a comparative? They have a completely different tax base to afford a completely different, so you have to start thinking about, so that would give you the parameter to say, this is who we are looking for, and you could do that.
I'm just wondering if there's a way, I know this is going to take some hard work to put this in place, but is there a way that we could do this where that we I'm not saying we don't tweak it upon occasion, but we say, okay, this is the criteria, and then ask everybody, because if you do it over the space of a year-long effort within a department, it's not going to take a huge amount of effort. Where that you go hire Gallagher, you're going to pay him $120,000 to go and in an intense amount of time. And a lot of the effort that Gallagher is going to put in is going and sitting down with all the departments and having those conversations. And I'm just wondering, is there a way to, with some time and energy, do it in-house? And it sounds like that there is, but it would take a lot of time and effort to build the criteria with which you would do that.
Yeah, I think the departments and offices would be really, I think, supportive of it and want to be honest about it. I think the interesting element that you go back to the 12 through 14, 15, 16 is how do you do the crosswalk between basically the same job function.
I don't know where you went.
The same job function within different offices and departments so that you have commonality, so that a 14 that does the same office functions, how do you honor that, I think, so to speak. So, but you can get there.
I think we were almost done too. I don't think I had any of these slides.
No, I think your next slide was a question slide.
Oh,
Then
that
your
was
next
just my
steps.
done. That's it. That's my last slide. Which is what we've been doing.
That's just a question that I had, kind of thinking out loud. Is there a way to, over the space of the next year or so, put together some parameters so that we aren't 8 years behind and, kind of can figure out a way to keep
We
it
could do
current?
that. I mean, I think you could do that by resolution, and you could also put in like a yearly hey, every 2 years, this is what we're asking departments to do. They need to provide us this information. We're going to have workshops throughout the year. I mean, that's something that you can put in your resolution. I think we need to be very particular with our
Yeah.
comparables.
And I don't know how we then also, because I think your point about total compensation is we, again, we're providing a VEBA, that other comparable county's not providing a VEBA, or they're providing a deferred compensation match. We don't provide a deferred compensation match. So there are these other things that go into that total compensation package that you might, complete picture.
All right.
Shut up.
Any other?
No, I don't think you need to be quiet. I mean, this really is.
They're
This
gonna
is
start throwing pins at
well,
you.
this is a. I mean, yeah. And we can have this individual discussions as smaller groups as well. I mean, we know this is a significant issue, having a competitive salary. And yes, benefits are important. We've heard that, but we also know that salary is really, really important. So how do we stay competitive in the marketplace? There are certain reasons people will stay here. And people are not always leaving because they can make more money elsewhere, because they live here, they want this, they're committed to public service here. But in the end, there are some that will leave for salary purposes as well. But we know work environment and the culture and, their value to this organization will keep people here. But we also have to stay within a competitive range. Maybe it's not, we're at 100%. Maybe we've made the commitment to be between 92 and 94% of that competitive range. But you can set those parameters out by your policy.
I appreciate your describing it that way. I think you have to paint a complete picture in order to have a complete understanding of what a position is. You guys have done this. Having an employee that I provide a work vehicle and fuel that they can take it home, and the identical position that does not have that benefit, that is a very large benefit. And if you look at their salary side by side, you don't have the complete picture. It's not the same. And you really have to look at the whole picture to be able to evaluate that.
All right, is there any other comments, questions? So, to go from here, are you going to meet with employees and ask what their thoughts are, or do we do another workshop with employees included?
What are some of the big things that I think the board wants to see in another workshop? Do you want to see some more numbers? What else do you want to have more conversation on job duties and what we're, trying to get around reclassification, and see maybe that could justify increasing steps? Or I guess, what does the board want to see?
Something very simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I like
one of the
simple.
things I heard is, how could we set up the parameters to have the individual departments and offices, so we don't have to go out to a Gallagher-like firm for salaries. I know departments are doing it, frankly. So maybe setting up a policy to maybe have that in a resolution, something, what would that look like? And would be one item for sure.
I mean, we're still going to have the back and forth. We're still going to have the wrestling. If the sheriff goes through the process, and we did it today in the consent agenda. The sheriff is hiring a staff at a step 3, grade 3. See if I can remember. But they're already doing that. They're already providing that justification. If we could do it in a organized manner, that I guess I'm not sure exactly how to say this, but in somewhat a duplicatable fashion, where that it gets to be, you say, this is the process that we use, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time, and it would kind of negate the need for the Gallagher study. Because I know the sheriff does that over and over whenever he's evaluating, because somebody comes in, and that's a real-world, in real-time evaluation of this is what this individual, they can go to Benton County and make this, they can go Walla Walla County and make this, so they're doing it in real time. And if there was a way that we could put it together where that we in real time, in a constant basis, are updating our own cost evaluation and benefits evaluation.
So maybe help the board think about prioritization then as well. So if keeping the grid competitive is number one, the exempt, non-exempt
I think that would be,
might be well,
Two.
probably number one since it's actually the law. But those two, maybe longevity, which might be step increases, or some other longevity scenario might be number three. Were there other items that were kind of embedded in here that?
Let me go back to the beginning, however I can. What were my, oh, sorry. Let me go back to my topics. So those were my topics. This one? Nope, not that one.
this one.
Not a PowerPoint person.
I think at this point, I think the board is more concerned about grades and overall salary grades, and are we paying for what we're asking people to do? You know, are they competitive in the job network? Where are we losing people?
Yeah.
And that ties into the threshold for exempt status, and maybe we need to reclassify some people as exempt and vice versa. So it's a conversation. I think that's probably what at least I got from the board of that's.
I think I heard the least was the making it more complicated by adding more grades, the longevity.
Yeah.
But we probably still need to do some thinking about it.
Yeah.
But if we have a finite set of money to spend, adding it into more grades versus keeping our grid competitive seems to be a better choice.
Well, and just as another factor to think about, if you did add steps, not only would it be whatever percent in between, there's also COLA on top of that. So it made, say you did 2.5%, but you do a 3% COLA, you're really now at a 5.5%. So it does make those, factors a little higher for the salaries and the money that's available.
Or something that you said there, if we were to tie something to the CPI, what CPI is that, and which do we tie it to? Do we tie it to the one that the Washington State itself uses and say, okay, this is what we're going to tie CPI to, which is going to be the COLA, is going to be tied to the CPI of the state or something of that nature?
There was an idea that was passed around a little bit last year of that very factor you'd have to go non-bargs, right? Because all the bargaining units have their own negotiations. But if you tie the non-bargs to the CPI, again, choosing whichever one it was, up to a max amount, because what if the CPI is 8%, and the county is like, we don't have that, but maybe it's a max amount of 5% or 3%, whatever that happens to be, with then the idea of next year. So if it's 8% this year and we maxed it at 5%, that's an additional 3%. Next year it's 2%, but we go up to that 5% to help keep.
To roll over.
Yeah, to roll over to keep up with inflation. Because that's another thing I've heard, that throughout the years that inflation goes up and we're at, minimal for COLA too, for the, just your overall cost of living, so. Okay, I feel like I have a good direction. We'll definitely come back, get you some more information on the benefits, things like that, overall compensation packages, and, yeah, all
Good.
right.
We
Thank
do
you for your
have-
time.
And then we do have more workshops coming up on getting back to the health plans, so.
Good.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
All right,
So at
thank
this
you.
time, if we have concluded, we will adjourn the workshop. Oh, public comment. That's right. We have another public comment. We have two people in the room and one wants to speak.
So just as general information, in arbitration awards or negotiations, it's the West Coast CPI is commonly referred to in the state, that on the eastern Washington side of the state in general. And it's usually a percentage of that. My recommendation with all of this is start with the basics, start with a hourly set of rules or wages for hourly employees, then for salaried employees, and then remember that salaried employees, some get overtime, some don't. And then exempt, which is a whole different set of rules with exempt. For example, if I wanted to, which I don't, as long as I come in and touch the desk every day, I fulfill my Alaska. That's all I have to do. Make sure I clear it to the chief. So understanding the rules of each of those categories. And you got qualifies for overtime and so on and so on. Set it up that on an annual basis, your human resources or whoever's going to bring it, forward so that you can.
All righty, is there anybody else who would like to comment? Mr. Baumann?
So I don't know if anybody has seen, one of the reasons for some of my questions today, I don't know if you guys seen the news story about the Seattle Fire Department and the overtime pay that they are paying. So there's Seattle firefighters, and there's questions out there, so that the story is not complete, but they have firefighters that have been billing for 120 up to 155 hours per week. So you have somebody that's making $107,000 a year that they're getting, you know, that's their salary, but they're getting paid $318,000 a year because of their overtime. And when you consider there's 168 hours in a week, and they're billing out for 155 of the 168 hours, there's a lot of questions. And so as a lot of the explanation from the fire department for this is a lot of complex stuff that you can't follow it through the reasoning process. There's nobody that can work 155 hours in a 168-hour time frame. There's nobody that can do it. I've tried, and I've got to 46 hours until that's as far as I could go. And so for somebody to work 155 out of 168 is not reasonable. And as I tried to follow this story, which was pretty long, I couldn't. And so, yeah, for somebody that can't read, that's takes a lot of brain power to get that far.
All right, any other comments? All righty, we will adjourn the workshop. Okay, so.
You must have meant to say 146 hours.